Hello and welcome to another edition of Middleware Friday for September 1st, 2017. This is episode 30. And today we're going to be talking about releasing the monkey, unlocking enterprise survey data using Microsoft Flow and Power BI. So no community content today. We're just going to be focusing on the feature content, which is release the monkey, unlocking enterprise survey data. Question is, how do you get your data out of online survey platforms? And does it feel a little bit like So just to add a little context here, I think it's pretty normal for organizations to use these online survey platforms to get feedback. It could be feedback from customers, could be feedback from employees and other stakeholders. But one of the questions, at least, or concerns that I've had in the past is what happens to this data once it is out there in these platforms that the company has not a lot of control over. In some cases, some of these platforms may be free offerings or at least have a free tier. And usually there's nothing that comes for free. So it does beg the question, what happens to this data once it's in someone else's platform? Now, even if it is a paid subscription, there's usually some provisions that allow for more exclusivity over your data, or I guess data ownership. But then you get into the situation of the accounts are being used by different employees or contractors to create the survey, execute the survey, or analyze the results of the survey. Now, I recall hearing a story from a friend in another organization where they had a contractor in who was going out and actually surveying different customers on their perspectives. Now, in this case, this consultant, it was their job to be an industry expert. And they were really looking to help this customer group develop some insight about their customers. But it was fairly clear that this person had gained this industry knowledge through working at many other organizations within this sector. So, the question that I brought up when we were talking about federated identity with my friend is I said, well, how do you know that your data is not going to get used, in the next customer engagement that this consultant has, especially if they have the access to the account and they could actually go determine, a partial or a portion of your customer segment that may not be happy, use that insight to help their new customer based upon your actual data. So I've never been a real big fan of some of these online services because it promotes a lot of data leakage and it doesn't provide an organization with a ton of governance over what the data is and how it's being used. So this was something that I ran into recently just by browsing Office 365 tiles, is that there's a new service available to enterprise customer called Microsoft Forms. It's traditionally been available to customers in the education segment, but now there's a whole other wider audience that has access to this tool. So that's what got me going down this path, as we've been running a lot of surveys within our IT department, as we've tried to make some cultural changes in order to improve people's satisfaction about working at our organization. Now, so this was just an opportunity to actually use this platform as opposed to going outside and actually containing this information within our four walls per se. Another aspect to this segment or this episode is just how can we actually use this data to actually automate other business processes. So in the event we do get survey data that has some sort of an insight, well, the insight is only useful if it's actionable. But using Microsoft and some of their other cloud-based workflow platforms, we have the ability to now automate some different business processes off of survey data. So some of the key technologies that are involved in this episode include Microsoft Forms, as I have alluded to, and of course Microsoft Flow in order to do some orchestration across our different services that we're going to be using. Or we also have the ability to use Microsoft Forms and Azure Logic Apps, since the Microsoft Forms connector is available to both platforms. So we also can do pretty much all of the actions that I'm going to talk about in Logic Apps as well, with the exception of the approval portion of the workflow, which is exclusive, at least at this point, to Microsoft Flow, but certainly you can do most of this using Azure Logic Apps if that's what you would prefer. And I think it really comes down to your persona, which would drive the decision to use one technology over the other. I think it comes down to if you have a business user or perhaps an IT pro who doesn't have an integration expertise, who wants to go ahead and do a lot of this under the context of their own identity or a small team, they have the ability to do that. Or on the flip side, if you wanted your, say, center of excellence, your sort of core integration team to go ahead and handle this, they would have the ability to do that as well. So what is Microsoft Forms? Well, it is a simple, lightweight app that easily allows you to create surveys, quizzes, and polls. So you can see part of the reason why it came out of the education industry vertical, because you have quizzes, which would be a great tool where you could collect this feedback from students or parents. Now, though, it is available to other enterprise customers. So I've got this highlighted below. If you have SKUs such as the Enterprise E1, E3, and E5 plans, you would have entitlement to Microsoft Forms, and really that's why it showed up within our tenant. In terms of where can I access Microsoft Forms from, you can reach it by accessing portal.office.com, sign in with your credentials, and then you will actually see all of the different tiles that you have access to, and you will see it right here, Microsoft Forms, in my case right beside Microsoft Flow. From there you can go ahead and click on that icon and you'll see the forms that you have, any of the forms that you've created, and you can then go ahead and create a new form or create a new quiz. Now here's just a very brief example of a quiz where you can go ahead, create a quiz, create a series of questions, and then indicate which is the correct answer, and how many points you want to reward for that particular question. In this case, what is the capital of Alberta? There's two options, Calgary, Edmonton, with Edmonton being the correct option. Now, if you just want to have a survey, and that's what I've done, you can go ahead and choose that template, create or construct your series of questions, giving people the ability to choose one or more answers based upon their preferences. You will see a responses tab where you can go ahead and review the responses that you've had based upon the survey that you've sent out. And in many cases, this might be enough for you. In some cases, you may not even want automation from Microsoft Flow or Logic Apps. And if you don't need additional automation, then great, just use the tool as is. You can also go ahead and open it in Excel if that scratches that itch for you. Now, from a sharing perspective, there are two options. You can share with people inside your organization or outside your organization, and you can do so via a link or a QR code embedded or through an email. You can also share it as a template and share to collaborate with other people who might be interested in constructing or reviewing the results of your survey. So with the American football season just around the corner, I figured we'd have a little bit of fun with Microsoft Forms, Flow, and some other connectors. So the idea behind this is that I went out and sent out a survey to different people, MVPs. I posted it on the Microsoft Flow user group. I posted it in Twitter, and basically created an open survey for people to choose who they thought were going to win the different divisions within the NFL, and also whether or not they thought that the New England Patriots would repeat in winning the championship known as the Super Bowl, for those not familiar with American football. So what we have here is me sending out a link to football fans through a variety of different mediums, email, WhatsApp, Twitter, etc., with a link to a Microsoft form. Once people submit the Microsoft form, the Microsoft Forms connector within Flow is going to detect that it's been sent out, and it's going to go through an approval process. Now, in this case, the approval process wasn't overly warranted, but it would be good, as you know that there's always people that are trying to disrupt your form, and you may want to keep the integrity of your data within your form to the highest quality, so you may have an approval process that will vet whether or not the data is realistic or not, and then you can choose whether or not you want to discard it or approve it. And once it's been approved, we're going to use the Power BI connector and send this information into a Power BI streaming data set where it can be further analyzed. So let's go ahead and run this demo. Here we go. Here's the Middleware Friday football survey. And this one is open to the public, although by the time this is recorded, I'll probably have it shut down. But what it does highlight is that you don't have to be within an Office 365 organization in order to complete the survey. However, if that's what you would like to do, you can impose that as well. Now, I do have a lot of radio buttons here. It is important to know that you can also have checkboxes, text as well. So you're not confined to just radio buttons, but for the purpose of this survey, I thought it would be the most appropriate. So let's walk through this. Who's going to win the NFC East? I think the Dallas Cowboys will probably win, although with Ezekiel Elliott's suspension, it may be a little bit of a tougher journey. Now, who will win the NFC North? You know, my team is Detroit, but realistically, I got to think that the Packers will probably win. Again, Aaron Rodgers is just too good. Moving on to the NFC South, I'm going to go with Atlanta. They were in the Super Bowl last year. They had a huge lead at halftime. They blew it, but I think they'll be back, certainly to the extent that they'll win the NFC South. So NFC West, this is really a two-horse race in my mind. The Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals are starting to decline a little bit, I would say, with Carson Palmer. He's a good quarterback, but he is getting up there in age. So I'm going to go with the Seahawks once again. So let's move over to the AFC East. It's hard to bet against the Patriots at this point, so let's go with New England. Let's go to the AFC North. Probably going to go with Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll go with my sister's team. They're pretty good. They're always competitive. AFC South. Let's see here. None of these teams are good. I think I'll probably go with Houston Texans, though. And lastly, the AFC West. See, the Chargers, they're junk. The Raiders will probably be better, but I don't think they're quite ready yet. So the Broncos, they still have quarterback issues. Kansas City, I think I got to go with Kansas City this time around. But Oakland is improving. I think maybe next year they'll have the AFC West title. Who will win, or will New England repeat as Super Bowl champs? I'm going to say no, just because I think it's very difficult to repeat as champions in the NFL. And also, Julian Edelman got hurt last night in Detroit, so I got to think that that'll have an impact on their starts to their season anyway. So let's go ahead and submit this. And we'll find that, sure enough, it was submitted. And shortly, I should get an approval email. I've received an approval email from Flow. I've used some of the data coming out of the survey itself to ask a question. So this goes back to that point where if I wanted to validate a bunch of data to see if it was realistic or not, just to sort of prove the integrity of the response and give me the ability to discard data that was clearly fake or that doesn't make sense. So in this case, it's just an opportunity to see some of that data and give me a chance to approve it without having to go find the survey itself. So in this case, do they think the New England will repeat? The answer is no. So I'm just going to go ahead and approve this. Now I get bumped over to the approvals section of Microsoft Flow, and I can go ahead and confirm that I've approved this entry going into what will become Power BI. What is also interesting is that I don't have to respond to this through email. I also can respond through the Flow mobile app as well, which is a great place to actually quickly approve or deny any sort of requests that are coming in. Before we dive into how the application was constructed, let's take a look at the results within Power BI. So as we can see, the New England Patriots are the favorite within the AFC East. Pittsburgh Steelers are in second. they're tied for second. And Baltimore is considered the front runner in the AFC North by a lot of the integration gurus around the world. Let's see, we've got Indianapolis with 6, so they're tied with Houston. So Houston and Indy are tied. Then we've got Oakland, and we've got a bunch of Denver Bronco fans as well, so they feel confident in their chances. The New York Giants are in the lead in the NFC East, ahead of the Cowboys. Let's go to the NFC North, and we've got the Chicago Bears 8 and Green Bay at 5. I have no idea what you people are thinking. Chicago will not win. They're brutal. The NFC South, the Atlanta Falcons, no surprise, taking the lion's share there. Let's see Tampa Bay. They're up and coming, so not a bad choice, but I got to think Atlanta should win. And no surprise, knowing that this is a Microsoft community, the Seattle Seahawks are in the lead for the NFC West. We've got San Francisco with 3 votes, and Arizona with 2, and LA Rams at 2. Now, the big question is, will New England repeat? And it looks like it's 50-50. So 50-50 chance that New England will repeat based upon the integration community, which may not be the most accurate reading, as some of the international MVPs admitted that they don't follow football, but I certainly appreciate their participation regardless. Okay, let's go deeper into the solution itself. Before we look at the Microsoft Flow, let's take a look at how we can set up the Power BI streaming data sets, as we need this to be constructed first before we can go ahead and call it from Microsoft Flow. So from within Power BI, so you can reach it at app.powerbi.com. Click on your workspace or my workspace, and then what you will see is 4 different tabs: dashboards, reports, workbooks, and data sets. Go ahead and click on data sets, and then what you can do is go ahead and click on create, and then select streaming data set. Now you will see 3 different options. So we've got the API streaming data set, Azure Stream Analytics, and PubNub. So for our demonstration, we want to select API. Then we want to provide a data set name and a series of different fields that we're going to want to populate with the appropriate data type, and include whether or not we want historic data analysis, which I've turned on just because I just want the data retained for a longer duration. Now, what we have is a completed streaming data set, data model. And here what I've done is I've created just different fields for the different conferences within the NFL. And in this case, these are all going to be text responses. And once I've completed that, I just go ahead and click on done. Once I've done that, I can now go ahead and click on this report icon. It's called Football Survey, which I called it previously. And when I go ahead and click on the report view, then what will happen is I'll get taken into this view within Power BI, which is a blank canvas, and I can see all of the different fields that are available as part of my data model. And from there, I can go ahead and use any of the visualizations, both out of the box or from the store, in order to project this data onto my canvas. And as you saw before, this is what the end result looks like. And in my case, I was just using pie charts in order to provide that visualization for you. So here's the flow design, and I'll jump into the flow portal itself. And here I am in the flow portal. And what I can do is what I will do is look at the forms connector, and let's go into edit mode first. So from the edit perspective, I can go ahead and choose the form that I want to actually consume from. So in this case, it's Middleware Friday, Football Survey. Now, I don't have control over the frequency in which I'm receiving these responses. And I've noticed some inconsistencies. Sometimes it fires right away, other times it will fire a few moments later. So that's something, it is still in preview, so I would imagine that's something that's being worked on. Now, the next step is I want to create an approval. And in this case, I need to use an email address from my tenant. So in this case, it's going to my account, and I'm able to provide some additional details. And of course, just like any other Flow or Logic app, I can go ahead and use data from previous actions within my workflow. Now, in this case, these are all of the questions that are in my survey. So that's pretty cool. I've created my survey previously completely disconnected. Once I wire up this connector to this particular form, it now has access to all of those different fields that exist in my survey. So that's pretty slick how dynamic that actually is. If I want to actually provide links, like perhaps if you had a SharePoint document you wanted to approve, you would go ahead and use these different features, but I haven't chosen to do so. Now, what will happen is when that approval goes out to the email, as you saw in the email, you have a choice whether or not to approve or reject the particular request. In this case, I'm saying if it's approved, then we want to go ahead and add a row to a Power BI data set. So here's response. This is all of the metadata related to the response itself. So we've got approver email, approver name, the response, whether or not it was approve or reject. So this is all pretty cool. So moving on to when the response has been approved, here's my Power BI. I go ahead and choose my workspace, which is my workspace. The data set in this case was called football survey. And in the table, it's always called real-time data when you go ahead and use this. And here I'm just plotting the responses from the form that was submitted. So that concludes another episode of Middleware Friday. Thank you for watching, and thank you BizTalk360 for being a great partner of the show. Just as a reminder, BizTalk360 is hosting another edition of Integrate, this time in the USA. There is an early bird special going on. By the time you see this, the early bird will have expired, but you can still receive a lower price if you register between September 1st and September 30th. Otherwise, you'll have to pay the full price with it in October. Recently announced, Scott Guthrie, it's been announced that he is going to be keynoting the conference, which is always great to have him participate in those types of things. Also, the next episode, which will be on September 8th, Steph Jan Wiggers will be talking about EventGrid. It is a very publicized service that's pretty interesting. It's part of the overall serverless platform that allows for high rate of event publication and subscription, both out of the box from different Azure services and custom events. So be sure to check that out. Once again, have a great Labor Day, and we'll catch you next time on Middleware Friday.